Hello and welcome to Comic Culture. I'm Terrence Dollard, a professor in the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. My guest today is artist Glenn Whitmore. Glenn, welcome to Comic Culture.
Thank you, Terrence. Glad to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about your creation, Captain Clockwork. What can you tell us about this character? I've taken a look at some of the stuff that you've got online, and it seems like it's sort of an homage to those great stories from comics' golden age.
Well, I actually like all the ages, all the different ages in comics, but yeah, my style kind of tends to go towards the very deco-y, Darwin Cook type of look to it. So that's sort of how it evolved. Some of my other influences are Alex Toth. I like Nick Cardy. He's one of my favorites. But yeah, I'm just definitely old school. Definitely like the Darwin Cook / Michael Cho kind of very retro look to it. So
And
yes.
what's the character or the I guess the concept all about? Because I look at it and it looks like it's something where we're kind of combining, you know, maybe that retro tech with a modern sensibility. I'm just wondering if you could kind of give us that elevator pitch about Captain Clockwork.
Sure. Okay. It's four generations of the same hero given the responsibility to make sure history runs correctly. And sometimes their missions make them more popular. Sometimes their missions make them face tough choices and make them less popular. But they're clockworks, and they're supposed to make sure history runs correctly. And there are villains and threats that come along that threaten to change the course of history, and they have to keep it on course, making things run like clockwork, you know. And there's a little bit of time travel involved as well. So, and that's the basic concept. There's a golden age version from the World War II. There's a Cold War Silver Age version. There's an 80s 90s version, which is sort of reflects that you know, that dark image age. And then there's the current version, and the current version goes all the way into the future. So that's one time I was just trying to come up with the look for the character, and what happened was I came up with 4 different versions, and I couldn't decide on one. And I thought, what the heck? I'll combine the idea for all 4 of them into one big storyline, and that's how it grew.
You talked about how it was an idea that inspired you to do this bigger storyline. Do you have the whole storyline sort of figured out, that you know what the next arc's going to be and the one after that, or is it something where you kind of go with the flow based on the concepts that you've been playing with?
I have a general idea of where I want each of the 4 clockworks to end up. But I sort of go with the flow too. So I just know like there's going to be a big climax in World War II, obviously with the Axis powers trying to get his chronometer, and the Russians in the 60s, and and in the 80s we got the Americans trying to get the chronometer and so forth. So so that's how I came up with that. But I do have a general story arc, a general direction, but nothing specific yet. So.
And you mentioned that this is a generational tale with 4 distinct heroes. I'm wondering if your supporting cast, if we see them in later years, do we see the same characters, or do we see their descendants? And if so, how do they sort of relate to the Captain?
The 40s version has his own cast of characters that he interacts with. They all have their own cast that they all interact with. For the most part, they're separate, but some of them do sort of survive the generation jump a little bit.
And speaking of the generation jump, you are back in the 90s, the image age that you were calling it. You were working mostly, I think, for DC as a colorist, and I see that you've got a great big tablet next to you, and I'm wondering how you made that jump from the traditional methods of coloring to the more modern digital methods.
Well, I was basically forced to. For years I worked for DC, and all I did were color guides. You know, the traditional way to make color, to create the color schemes for all the panels, were you'd get a Xerox page from DC or whatever publisher, and you'd spec up colors on them, and you would give them to a separator. Uh, and then on later years, they developed software to be able to create these separations without the traditional overlays with magenta, cyan, yellow. So it was all in Photoshop. And then out of necessity, the publishers like DC kind of got rid of the colorists because they were the middleman now, because now the artist and the separator working in Photoshop were one. So I kind of got forced out of that by the end of by the year 2000. But so out of necessity, I had to learn Photoshop, and that's where I started. And I actually took a job as a security guard over the next few years while I got on my feet, learning the software and then trying to break back into the industry, because all those years of working on Superman, even though I had a great reputation for meeting deadlines and doing good work, it didn't matter because now it was all digital. So I'm probably one of the few colorists working back then, still now making the jump to digital, but and still doing it. So
basically, when we look at what traditionally had been described as the four-color book, the fact that you were able to, in the 90s, I guess paper was improving, you were able to put a lot more emotion and a lot more mood into a page than maybe someone in the 60s or the 70s. So I'm wondering, your approach to putting color on the page and aiding the story, was this something where you just kind of looked at the page and said, the lighting seems to be going this way? Are you working in conjunction with the editor or the writer to come up with the right palette? Or is it something like a combination of the two?
Well, actually, it's more I get my cues from the actual art, and I just try to pay attention to. Well, obviously, you got to read the script and know that the particular scenes take place at a certain time of day. There's an approach where there's like two different approaches. You could do literal color and you can do emotional color, and I'd like to use both, but using the emotional color to punch up a particularly dramatic panel. The literal color is good, but when you punch it up with the emotional color, it just sort of like breaks it up, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And it seems when we look at comics today, now that colors are being done digitally, that it seems almost like there's less for an inker to do in order to, add that drama to the page. It seems that the colorist has taken on the role of sort of, if this were a film, sort of the lighting director. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the way that color has changed from, the role, I guess, in the comic now that the publishing is done so differently.
This is my opinion, and that is, I'm amazed at what colorists do today with doing. It just seems like every panel is a full color painted illustration. It just seems like, but I sort of long for the days when the black and white pages I got were strong designs. I like to spot color. I'm more of and if you look at my own Captain Clockwork pages, I'm very keen on just strong design and spotting black areas and just making it hold together as a whole, rather than go full tilt, trying to make every panel look like a painting, So when I see the direction that most modern comics are going in, I sort of long for those simpler days. I'm more of I'm more of a color choice guy. I just like good, strong color choices. And I don't mind gradations or modeling here and there, but it's got to be good, strong color choices for me. So
it's interesting. I was looking at a video earlier before the interview, and there's someone doing a page, and they were coloring it. I think they were actually using acrylic wash on it. And what struck me was that they were adding in so much shadowing that it just made me wonder, you know, if they weren't the penciler, how would that, how would the penciler feel about it? Because it was almost like it was a big open palette for the colorist, and it seemed like he had a lot, or she had a lot of room to play with. So I'm wondering, when you get a page where it's less of that, you know, solid black on the page, how much leeway do you feel that you should be taking with it to add in, well, this must be where the light source is coming from, or this would look really dramatic if I did it this way?
I don't really think about how the penciler might feel about it. I just do what I just try to make it the best I can do, make it work. So I just take what I'm given and I just do the best I can with it, whatever it is. I went to the Kubert school, right? And Joe Kubert was one of my instructors, and he really emphasized a lot. The earlier you are on in the process, the more responsibility you have for making it easier for the penciler makes it easier for the inker makes it easier for the colorist, that kind of thing. So, like, to me, no matter where I am in the process, whether it's on my Captain Clockwork books or on these pages here, you know, my responsibility is to make it easier for the next guy in line. So that's how I feel about it. That's my philosophy. So if I have to draw a page for somebody, it's got to be strong in black and white, no matter what. Just make it so clear and simple for the next guy in line that there's no question. And you know, that's what I think every comic book artist's job is.
I've watched some of your videos on Facebook. I guess you do like a live stream where you're inking a page or something like that. So I'm wondering, I know that you do Kickstarter to help support the books that you're working on, Captain Clockwork, and I'm just wondering, how do you keep engaged with folks so that they can, you know, not only know that you've got the Kickstarter coming up, but also, you know, that when you're doing a live stream of you inking a page or penciling a page or coloring a page, that you can engage with them and you know, have that relationship?
The live streams are mainly on just for Facebook. I haven't really learned YouTube as of yet. I do, but as far as the upcoming Kickstarter is concerned, I'm launching my campaign on March 4th of 2019. Time marches forth. That's my hashtag for the campaign. I've been using LinkedIn. I've been using Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So I've been using all four of those in conjunction with each other, and just keeping in touch that way. I'm a big believer in using social media to let people know. So
it seems that Kickstarter is a great way for someone who has a project that they're really passionate about, but maybe they just can't get their foot in the door of you know, Marvel or DC or Image. So when you have an idea for the latest arc in Captain Clockwork, when do you start to think to yourself, okay, I need to get this Kickstarter campaign worked out? Are you like just in the planning stage? Do you have most of the pages laid out? Or is it something where, you know, you're waiting until that money comes in because it's going to help you when you're busy doing all of your work?
The Clockwork material that I came up with for this upcoming project, I've done the stories over the past few years, just on my own time. It takes me a week to do a page, just spending a couple of hours a night during the week. But the work for the book is already done. I've got it all worked out. This is my 64-page book, and I've just got it in a 3-ring binder. But when you pledge towards the campaign, the book is pretty much ready to go. It's ready to print. But my idea was that this is my first campaign. It'll be in March 2019, and I figure March and September would be good months to run campaigns. March for a summer book, and then September for a holiday book, a product for the holiday. So that's my game plan. Is I just gear myself up to these 2 months, March and September, and you know, there's 2 months turnaround time usually to get a book printed. April, May, and then June you get the book. September rolls around, do the campaign. October, November, do the books, and send out the book.
And you mentioned that you spend about 2 hours a night. So I'm wondering how you, I mean, that's a great deal of discipline, because I'm sure there's other things that come up, whether it's,
Right.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
there's a movie that you're going to go see, or, you know, maybe you're going to go do something with the family. So how do you kind of work that out so people know, you know, just give him the 2 hours a night, he's going to work on this project, it means something because it's going to be published, it's going to be, you know, his profession. And at the same time, people aren't saying, but you worked all day.
Actually, the way I do it is my usually my 2 hours, you know, Monday through Thursday, that's 8 hours. Monday through Thursday, there's usually not a lot going on. And then I just got to figure out how to fit in 2 hours over Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's 10 hours in a week to do a page, and that's enough, you know. But normally what I do is I get up, I do the gym, I come home, and then I work on the page for 2 hours, and then at noon I get started on my regular coloring work, paying work. And that's Monday through Thursday. And of course I'll be working into the night most of those nights. I'll work till 9, 10 at night, and then wind down for bed. So that's how I usually work that out. And then hopefully in the weekend, you know, you just fit in the 2 hours on Friday or the Saturday, and you know, you have time to go out and meet with friends. I'm not married. I don't, you know, so I don't have to worry about that.
So you mentioned the Kubert School. You mentioned that you were working
Right.
for DC Comics. So is it
Right.
easier for you to get people interested in your solo work because you have this big reputation, or is it something that you're constantly having to kind of build up because maybe people don't know you as a household name?
Probably the latter. The more I get away from my DC days, the further time passes. It's a little more difficult. I don't know why that is, but I do have, you know, contacts still that I've done work for that have been great help to me, and have reached out to me. I know for a lot of my coloring gigs, I still work with guys that I worked with back at DC, and that's been a big boon to me. I know when I do my work for Archie Comics, I colored a couple of Jerry Ordway covers, and Jerry suggested me I think he suggested me for those. There was a Archie 1941 cover, and then there was a where is it? Oh, it was the Batman 66. He did a Batman 66 cover, which I colored. And John Bogdanoff, who was the artist on Man of Steel in the 90s, actually he did a double page spread for an upcoming Death of Superman omnibus that DC's going to re-release, and I colored the 2-page spread. So, and that'll be coming out, you know, hopefully later this year, I guess. So, and Michael Urey is an editor at Tomorrow's, who's down in your neck of the woods, north, you know. He's been great at throwing me coloring covers. So quite often I colored back issue magazine covers, and I do stuff for John Morrow and Chris Duffy over at United Plankton Pictures. He does SpongeBob. He's editor there. I did work with him in the 90s on Superman, and so he uses me from time to time. So those contacts that I've made in the 90s with DC have helped me along in current times. So
seems like it's that small circle, you know. Michael Urey has been, he actually was in our studio last year talking about Back Issue Magazine, and he
Right.
gave me a copy, and I was just surprised at first off how many people are passionate about comics and are writing about it, but also He's got a great Facebook page, and I guess we shouldn't be advertising his Facebook page, but the back issue page has a lot of people talking about comics, and you run into a lot of the creators. And I did remember seeing your name talking about, you did this particular piece or that particular piece. And now you mentioned Archie Comics, and it's interesting,
Sure.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like a lot of the folks who are making the comics that we still talk about in the 80s and 90s are over at Archie Comics now, still telling compelling stories with different characters, and I'm wondering if that's the case or if I'm mistaken.
No, I think that's definitely the case. Guys that I worked with at DC are now at Archie. Paul Kupperberg, Bob Smith, Alan Milgram was a Marvel guy, and I colored some of his inking at Archie. Yeah, it's the Archie stuff. Actually, the Archie stuff is right up my alley, because I was talking before about just kind of not flatter colors and just design and just that traditional comic booky look. And I think that's right up my alley. Matter of fact, I don't know if you probably can't see it, but I'm actually working on an Archie page right now. So, well, Archie just recently announced they're bringing back Archie the Married Life from it's called Archie the Married Life, 10 years on, and it's Archie married to Betty 10 years later, and Archie married to Veronica 10 years later, and it's a continuation of the series I colored back between 2010 and 2014, which was one of my favorite assignments ever. Was coloring that series.
Yeah. Archie seems to be the publisher that doesn't mind taking a risk with their characters. And I see we just have a few minutes left before we wrap up. I did want to talk about when DC took a risk with one of their characters. You were working on Superman around the time that Superman was, well, sadly killed. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about coloring that series and maybe sort of the reaction at the time.
I remember being in the room when it was conceived, because it was really cool to be in on the super summits where all the writers and artists met, and they would have me come in along as well, and I got to sit in and just hang out and watch them do their thing. So I don't know if you know the story behind it, but it was supposed to be, we were working up to Superman's wedding for Superman 75, and but then there was this TV show in the works called Lois and Clark, which was where they weren't going to be married. So Jeanette Kahn had walked in and said, "Guys, hold off on this wedding, because we got this TV series." So we just had there was this huge gap, and we didn't know what to do. So what happened was somebody came up with the idea to kill him, and Mike Carlin said, "Well, what happens then? What would really happen, and how would the world react and everything?" And that's how that grew. You and I, we know the deal. When they kill off a character, eventually they're going to bring him back or her back or what, So it's just, we know it's a gimmick. We play along with the game. We just like to see how they do it, how well they do it. But it was just surprising to see, the general media and the general public just all of a sudden believing that Superman had been killed, and just to get swept up in this wave of the death of Superman mania. So just real quick, here's a footnote. I was involved in the death of Superman, the death of Archie, the marriage of Superman, and the marriage of Archie. So I'm the one freelancer in comics history who can say I was involved in all four of those. It's one of those little trivia things that I'm proud of myself. So.
Well, Glenn, they're telling me that we are out of time. Just quickly, if somebody wanted to find out more about Captain Clockwork, is there a website they can go to? CaptainClockwork.com.
And if you log on in the month of March 2019, it'll take you to the Kickstarter page.
Well, Glenn, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with us. Thank you at home for watching Comic Culture. We will see you again soon. Comic Culture is a production of the Department of Mass Communication at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke.